to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife last weekend. U.S. President Donald Trump has said Washington will now begin striking drug cartels on land in Mexico. Trump said the move follows months of maritime operations in the Eastern Pacific and Caribbean, which he claimed significantly weakened cartel drug trafficking routes. Speaking in an interview, Trump said the cartels are running Mexico and described the situation as tragic, alleging that cartel violence is responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths each year in the U.S. He said the United States has had major success at sea and will now shift focus to land-based action against the cartels. Soon after the capture of Maduro, Trump had earlier warned Mexico that it could be the next target. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has strongly rejected the idea of U.S. intervention in her country. She further warned that such actions have never brought stability to Latin America. So this is, of course, a very big development, viewers, a kind of indirect coercion that Trump is trying to exercise. Certainly now in Venezuela, but also now in Mexico. I have Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former diplomat, joining me on the broadcast. Ambassador Sachdev, welcome. And we're of course talking about the indirect coercion of Trump, which is now being seen blatantly, and now also in Mexico. What would you like to say?
I have seen the excerpts of Fox interview that President Trump seemed to have given. It does not specifically mention what measures is he going to take to prevent the land border being used to smuggle drugs into the United States. He has railed against the cartels of drug making and drug dealing in Mexico, but has not specifically mentioned what kind of steps he has in mind. On the other hand, I have earlier seen President Sheinbaum's statement and comments that she has not agreed to joint action or stationing of American anti-drugs officials in Mexico for taking on the cartels, etc. So she is, in her own way, insisting on having total sovereignty over Mexico. In this regard, she has strengthened the border arrangement from her side so that drug smuggling is prevented. But then there are all sort of allegations flying, and the figures are being bandied are quite different. For example, President Trump's statement that 250,000 to 300,000 Americans are dying every year due to drugs is subject to various interpretations. President is often accused of hyperbole. He may be imprecise. Secondly, United States is a consumer of drugs, if that statement is taken at its face value. What has the United States done to prevent consumption? That is a domestic sort of concern on which President Trump and U.S. administration have all the authority they need. While going into other sovereign lands in the name of fighting drugs would require cooperation and agreement with the respective countries and their governments. So it's a moving situation. but Mr. Trump is known to create such space for his own action by sort of engaging in rhetorical statements and coercive strategies. So let's see where does it take. But I think for the moment I would be very surprised if any threat to invade Mexico or impose certain dynamic or kinetic situation onto that country would be possible. Thank you.
Ambassador Sachdev, that's actually a very pertinent and an excellent point that you've made. And perhaps Trump really should be asked that question, because the US is a consumer of narcotics. And here he is claiming that, he's trying to destroy these drug cartels. That's a very good point you've made. And my question now to you is that, Trump, of course, is not respecting sovereignty of nations, and he's trying to damage his bilateral relations with a key neighbor, which is Mexico. But how likely is it that Mexico would consent to US military strikes on his territory, and what would be the political cost for Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum if she were pressured into such cooperation?
It's a good question. I've partly tried to reply to that. But if you go through the history, you would notice that Mexican perspective of ties with the United States is very different. There's as a waggish saying in Spanish in Mexico goes, God pity Mexico, so far from heaven and so close to United States. Mexicans have their own worldview. They point out that the United States over past 2 centuries has taken over much of Mexican territory. They point out that California used to be Mexican, Texas used to be Mexican, Arizona used to be Mexican territory. And now nobody talks about those things. So Mexicans have their own injured nationalism when it comes to United States. The way Spanish speakers of Mexican origin are treated in United States also invokes certain resentment. And Mexico has done a lot to come to terms with United States preponderance and they take advantage of it. Mexico has invited successfully investors from the United States to exploit cheaper labor and then ship automobiles, textiles, and other things from Mexico to the United States. So there's a considerable synergy between the two countries. Mexican oil complements United States, which is the world's largest energy consumer. So all that told, there is an undercurrent of resentment on one hand at social level, and there is an economic complementarity between the two neighbors. So in particular, about let's say 15 to 20% of Americans are of Hispanic stock, and they would be, I imagine, quite disturbed if an invasion of Mexico was to be planned. If this can happen to Mexico, which is the largest Spanish-speaking country in Central America, whatever Trump might justify it with, the same argument can be used against Brazil, against many other countries of Latin America. all this in the context of Monroe Doctrine, which is Monroe Doctrine on steroids that President Trump's national security strategy launched in November has unveiled. Apparently, it's gone beyond the 200-year-old Monroe Doctrine, which exclusively presents New World, the Western Hemisphere, as America's preserve. Now, Mr. Donald Trump's corollary to that Monroe Doctrine is that the United States will not countenance
Ambassador
any
Sachdev, apologies for interrupting you, but